Dr. Vex-Nine stared at the readouts with the kind of confusion typically reserved for finding your lunch, eating your homework. The numbers couldn't be right. They simply couldn't be. Run the diagnostics again, he barked at his assistant, Cree-12, who was currently resembling a nervous pile of blue jelly. The neural dampeners must be malfunctioning. Sir, I have run them 17 times. The equipment is functioning perfectly. Cree-12's voice quivered like a leaf in a hurricane. The human subject is still conscious. Vex-Nine's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sure sign of his mounting frustration. In his 300 cycles of studying pain tolerance across the galaxy's species, he had never encountered anything this ridiculous. The Thrakari collapsed after a single neural pulse. The mighty Gorvans, those mountain-sized warriors, crumpled like wet paper after 3. Even the supposedly indestructible Nexari couldn't withstand more than 5 pulses before their minds shut down completely. But this human? This fragile-looking creature with its pathetic single heart and laughably thin skin. She was on pulse number 43 and still glaring at him with those unsettling brown eyes. Increase the intensity, Vex-Nine commanded, his tentacles writhing with scientific excitement mixed with growing unease. The human subject, designated Terror Subject 1 but apparently named Maya Reeves according to her identification chip, let out what could only be described as a laugh. Not a scream, not a whimper, but an actual laugh. Is that all you have got, Squid Face? My little brother hits harder than your fancy torture machine. Vex-Nine's colleagues from the Galactic Research Council would have found this situation fascinating if they weren't currently hiding behind reinforced barriers 3 levels up. They had come to witness what they assumed would be a routine demonstration of human fragility. Instead, they were watching their most respected pain researcher slowly lose his mind. Sir, whispered Cree-12, perhaps we should consider that our initial assumptions about human physiology were incomplete. Nonsense. Vex-Nine's voice cracked like a whip. Humans are Category 7 species, soft tissue, minimal redundant organs, primitive neural networks. They should have collapsed within the first 10 pulses. This is impossible. Maya Reeves shifted in her restraints, the metal bonds creaking under the strain. You know what's impossible? The fact that you guys conquered half the galaxy with this kindergarten-level interrogation technique. Seriously, my dentist is scarier than this. The neural pulse generator hummed ominously as Vex-Nine cranked it to level 50. Warning lights began flashing throughout the laboratory. Several of his assistants evacuated the room entirely. This will liquefy your brain matter, Vex-Nine announced with the confidence of someone who had never been more wrong about anything in his entire existence. Bring it on, Doc Octopus. The pulse hit Maya like a freight train made of pure agony. Every nerve ending in her body screamed in protest. Colors that didn't exist painted themselves across her vision. For a moment, just a moment, she felt her consciousness waver. Then she bit down on her tongue, tasted blood, and smiled. That actually tickled. Got anything stronger, or are we done here? Vex-Nine's scientific worldview began crumbling faster than a sandcastle in a tsunami. He had dedicated his life to understanding pain, to mapping the precise points where conscious beings broke under pressure. It was elegant work, predictable work. Every species had their limit, their breaking point, their moment of surrender, except humans, apparently. Run a full biological scan, he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. There must be some sort of cybernetic enhancement, some hidden augmentation explaining this anomaly. The scanners whirred and clicked, bathing Maya in a blue light that made her look like a very annoyed ghost. The results appeared on the main display, and Vex-Nine felt his heart skip several beats. Completely organic. No enhancements, no modifications, no technological interventions of any kind. Just pure, stubborn, impossible human. The results show elevated endorphin production, Cree-12 reported, his voice trembling with either fear or excitement. But sir, the levels are done. They are beyond anything we have seen in any catalogued species. It's as if her body is actively fighting the pain stimuli and winning. Maya flexed her fingers, testing the restraints again. You know what your problem is. You are thinking about this all wrong. You see pain as something that breaks people. But humans, we use pain. We turn it into fuel. Impossible, Vex-Nine muttered, but his conviction was wavering. Pain is a universal constant. It's the great equalizer. It reduces all consciousness to its most basic survival instincts. Maybe for you guys, Maya said, her voice gaining strength despite having endured torture that should have reduced her to a gibbering mess. But see, humans have this funny thing called spite. And right now, I'm running on premium-grade, high-octane spite. The laboratory fell silent except for the humming of machinery and the sound of Vex-Nine's rapid breathing. He had built his entire career on the premise that consciousness was fragile, that intelligent beings could be reduced to their component fears through the precise application of suffering. But Maya Reeves was turning that premise into confetti. "Increase to level 75, he said, his voice hollow. "Sir, that level has never been tested on any living subject. The theoretical models suggest, do it." The machine's hum rose to a shriek. Warning klaxons blared throughout the facility. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing the laboratory from the rest of the complex. Maya felt the pulse building like a storm on the horizon. This one would be different. This one would push her beyond anything she had ever experienced. For the first time since this nightmare began, doubt crept into her mind. Then she thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the promise she had made to come home, about the sheer audacity of these tentacled academics thinking they could break her will with their science fair project. "Hey, Doc," she said, her voice steady despite the approaching tsunami of agony. "Before you fry my brain, can I ask you something?" Vex-Nine paused, his tentacle hovering over the activation control. "What? In all your fancy research, did you ever study what happens when you take a species that evolved by climbing to the top of the food chain on a planet that actively tries to kill everything on it, and then you make them really, really angry? What are you talking about?" Maya's smile turned predatory. "You are about to find out." The pulse hit her like the birth of a star. Every synapse in her brain fired simultaneously. Her nervous system became a highway of liquid fire. Reality shattered into kaleidoscopic fragments of pure sensation that transcended the mere concept of pain. And Maya Reeves laughed. Not a broken laugh, not a hysterical laugh, but a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the laboratory like rolling thunder. When the pulse ended, she was still conscious, still coherent, and still staring at Vex-Nine with eyes that held no trace of surrender. "That was actually pretty good," she admitted, her voice slightly hoarse but unbroken. "But here's the thing about humans, Doc. We don't just survive stuff like this. We remember it, we learn from it, and then we get even." Vex-Nine staggered backward, his scientific certainties crumbling around him like ancient ruins. "This is impossible. No organic being can withstand that level of neural disruption. The pain should have rendered you catatonic." "Pain is just weakness leaving the body," Maya said, repeating her drill sergeant's favorite phrase from basic training. "And lucky for me, I have got a lot of weakness to spare." The laboratory door burst open as security forces rushed in, their weapons drawn and ready. Behind them came Director Cash Prime, the facility's commanding officer, his expression a mixture of rage and bewilderment. "What is the meaning of this catastrophe?" Cash Prime demanded, his voice booming through translation speakers. "Half the facility is in emergency lockdown, and I'm receiving reports of impossible energy readings from this laboratory." Vex-Nine turned to face his superior, his tentacles drooping in defeat. "Sir, I believe we may have miscalculated regarding human physiology." "Miscalculated how? They don't break." Director Cash Prime's massive form loomed over the pain researcher. "Explain." "Sir, Subject Terra 1 has withstood neural pulse levels that should have killed her 3 times over. Not only is she still conscious, she appears to be thriving under the stress." Maya cleared her throat loudly. "Excuse me, Tentacle Brigade, but I'm right here. You can talk to me instead of about me." The security team tensed, weapons tracking toward the restrained human, but Cash Prime held up a hand, stopping them. His ancient eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, studied Maya with newfound interest. "You claim to feel no pain?" he asked directly. "Oh, I feel it," Maya replied cheerfully. "Every single pulse, every single volt, every single attempt to scramble my brains like Sunday morning eggs. I feel all of it." "Then why haven't you surrendered?" Maya's expression grew serious, and for the first time, the aliens in the room caught a glimpse of something that made their primitive fear centers fire warning shots. "Because surrendering is a choice," she said simply, "and I choose not to." The silence that followed was pregnant with implications that none of the assembled aliens were quite ready to face. They had built their understanding of conquered species on the assumption that sufficient pressure would break anyone's will to resist, but humans, apparently, were different. Humans had spite. "Director," Vex-Nine said quietly, "I believe we need to reconsider our classification of humanity as a Category 7 species. What would you recommend?" Vex-Nine looked at Maya, who was now humming what sounded suspiciously like a human battle song, and felt a chill run through his circulation system. "I'm not sure we have a category for what they are." Director Cash Prime approached Maya's restraint table slowly, like one might approach a sleeping predator. "Human, what do you want? Right now? A cheeseburger and a beer would be nice. Long term? I want to go home to my daughter and tell her about the time Mummy met some very rude aliens who tried to hurt her, but learned that humans don't quit. And if we were to release you?" Maya's smile was the kind that had launched 1,000 ships and burned down twice as many cities. "That depends entirely on whether you plan to visit Earth again." The implications of that statement hit the assembled aliens like a meteor strike. If humans couldn't be broken through pain, if they couldn't be coerced through suffering, then every assumption about controlling conquered populations would need to be revisited. And if humans got angry, "Sir," Cree 12 whispered urgently, "we should check the containment systems for the other human subjects." Director Kash Prime's blood went cold. "How many others?" 57, sir, all undergoing various tolerance testing in different laboratories throughout the facility. The facility's communication system crackled to life. "Alert! Alert! Multiple containment breaches in sectors 7 through 15. Security teams respond immediately. All human subjects have somehow escaped their restraints and are singing loudly while dismantling equipment." Maya's laugh filled the laboratory. "Oops, looks like your other experiments are going about as well as this one." Director Kash Prime realized, with the dawning horror of someone who had just kicked a sleeping dragon, that they might have made a terrible mistake in deciding to study human pain tolerance, because apparently, humans didn't just endure pain, they weaponized it. The singing was getting louder. Director Kash Prime had lived for over 4 centuries, conquered dozens of worlds, and personally overseen the subjugation of 17 different species. He had never, in all his extensive experience, encountered anything quite like the sound currently echoing through his research facility. 57 humans, supposedly broken by days of systematic torture, were belting out what his translation systems could only identify as "We will rock you" with the enthusiasm of a victory celebration. "Status report," he barked into his communicator, trying to ignore Maya's delighted grin. "Sir, the humans have somehow turned Laboratory 7 into what they are calling a karaoke bar. They have jury-rigged the pain amplifiers into some sort of sound system and are taking requests. What about the restraints? They appear to have picked the locks with their fingernails, sir." While under active neural suppression, Maya nodded approvingly. That would be Jake Morrison, former Navy SEAL, current insurance adjuster. Pretty sure he could escape from a black hole using nothing but dental floss and pure stubbornness. Vex-Nine, who had been quietly having what could only be described as a scientific breakdown, suddenly straightened. "Wait, you know the other subjects personally?" "Oh yeah, we are all from the same hometown, Millfield, Nebraska, population 847, if you don't count Mrs. Henderson's cats, which honestly, you probably should because they are basically running the place at this point." The blood drained from every alien face in the room. Well, the equivalent of blood. Some of them turned interesting shades of purple and green. "You are saying," Director Kash Prime said slowly, "that we accidentally abducted an entire human community." "Not the whole town," Maya replied cheerfully. "Just everyone who was at the 4th of July barbecue when your flying saucer showed up. Which, by the way, terrible timing. We take our potato salad competitions very seriously." The facility's alarm system chose that moment to escalate from mild concern to existential crisis. Red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow while a mechanical voice announced, "Warning, multiple human subjects have accessed the armory. Repeat, humans have accessed the armory. This is not a drill. This is exactly as bad as it sounds." "How did they access the armory?" Kash Prime demanded. "They asked nicely, sir. Apparently, Guard Captain Trix 14 was so impressed by their moxie that he just gave them the access codes." Maya beamed with pride. "That be our librarian, Mrs. Patterson. She once convinced the state legislature to double the library's funding using nothing but homemade cookies and passive-aggressive guilt. Your security team never stood a chance." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors, accompanied by what could only be described as tactical humming. The laboratory door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the smoke stepped a woman in her 60s, wearing a floral print dress that had somehow remained pristine despite days of alien torture. She carried what appeared to be an improvised weapon constructed from laboratory equipment and pure determination. "Maya Reeves, there you are," she said, as if finding her neighbor tied to an alien torture device was merely a minor inconvenience. "I have been looking everywhere for you. The Henderson boy is trying to organize a poker game using alien equipment as chips, and someone needs to talk sense into him before he accidentally trades our transportation home for a decent hand." "Hi, Mrs. Patterson," Maya said warmly. "How's the liberation going?" "Oh, wonderfully, dear. These aliens have the most fascinating technology. Did you know their neural dampeners can be reprogrammed to make excellent cappuccino machines?" Young Tommy figured it out in about 10 minutes. Vex-Nine made a sound like a deflating balloon. "You have been reprogramming our equipment." "Well, yes," Mrs. Patterson replied, as if this should be obvious. "Most of it wasn't being used for anything important, just torture and mind control, nothing useful like making coffee or charging our phones." More humans began filtering into the laboratory.
A man in his 40s wearing a torn mechanic's jumpsuit nodded politely to the aliens. "Afternoon, folks. Jake Morrison. I don't suppose any of you know how to get bloodstains out of alien fabric, because I may have gotten a little enthusiastic with your security droids. You destroyed our security droids," Director Kosh Prime asked weakly. "Well, destroyed is such a harsh word. I prefer aggressively recycled. They make excellent planters, by the way. Mrs. Chen already started an herb garden in what used to be your enforcement squad." A teenage boy pushed through the crowd, his eyes bright with excitement. "Maya, you have got to see what we found in their computer systems. These guys have been cataloging pain tolerance across the galaxy for centuries, and they are really, really bad at it." "How bad, Tommy?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. "They classified the Vorthan as extremely pain-resistant because they lasted through 12 neural pulses." Tommy held up a tablet displaying alien data. "Turns out, the Vorthan just fall asleep when they are bored. They weren't resisting torture, they were taking naps." The assembled aliens exchanged horrified glances. Their entire database of conquest psychology was apparently based on fundamental misunderstandings of alien physiology. "But that's impossible," Vex-Nine protested. "We have built our entire civilization on the principle that sufficient pressure breaks all resistance." "Yeah, well," said Jake, methodically freeing Maya from her restraints, "that's your first mistake right there. You are thinking like bullies instead of like people." "We are people," Director Kosh Prime said, his voice carrying centuries of authority. "Are you, though?" This came from a young woman who had just entered the laboratory, because people don't usually kidnap their neighbors for science experiments. "I'm Sarah Mills, by the way, high school chemistry teacher, and I have been having a very educational conversation with your research computers." "What kind of conversation?" Maya asked, though the predatory gleam in Sarah's eyes suggested she might not want to know. "The kind where I learned that these folks have been doing this torture research thing for about 300 years, and they have never once stopped to ask their subjects what they actually want." "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled up another display on Tommy's tablet. "Look at this. Species after species, broken down by pain tolerance, resistance to coercion, susceptibility to fear manipulation. But nowhere in this entire database is there a single entry about what might make these species happy, or what they might contribute willingly, or how they might solve problems together." Mrs. Patterson tisked disapprovingly. "That's no way to run a civilization, dear. You can't build a community by hurting people into compliance."
But conquest requires dominance," stammered Kosh Prime. "The strong must rule the weak. It's the natural order." "Says who?" Maya asked, now free and stretching muscles that had been cramped for days. "Because from where I'm standing, you guys seem pretty weak. You are so afraid of everyone else that you spend all your time figuring out how to hurt them instead of how to help them. We are not weak, we control half the galaxy. Do you, though?" Sarah's teacher voice cut through the protests like a laser. "Because controlling and leading are two very different things. A leader inspires people to follow. A controller just makes people want to escape. Which," added Jake cheerfully, "we did, pretty easily too." The humans of Millfield had unconsciously formed a loose circle around the aliens, not threatening, but definitely making a point. These people had endured days of systematic torture designed to break their spirits, and they had emerged not broken, not defeated, but somehow stronger, and more importantly, they had done it together. "I don't understand," Vex-Nine said, his scientific worldview crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. "How are you still functioning? The neural pulses should have reduced you to compliance. The isolation should have broken your social bonds. The fear conditioning should have made you desperate to please us." "Fear conditioning?" Maya laughed. "Doc, I'm from Nebraska. I have lived through 3 tornadoes, 2 floods, a blizzard that lasted 6 days, and 17 years of teaching middle school mathematics. Your torture machine is cute, but it's not exactly unprecedented. And social bonds," Mrs. Patterson added with grandmotherly authority. "Young man, we have been neighbors for decades. You think a little alien kidnapping is going to make us stop looking out for each other? I organized the church bake sale during the Johnson Farm crisis of '98. This is nothing." Director Kosh Prime felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries, genuine confusion. But pain is universal, suffering breaks all beings eventually. It's the fundamental constant of consciousness. "Maybe for you guys," Tommy said, his teenage wisdom cutting straight to the heart of the matter, "but humans don't experience pain in isolation. We share it, we support each other through it, and when someone tries to hurt us on purpose," he shrugged, "well, that just makes us mad, and you really don't want to make humans mad, added Sarah with the kind of smile that had made generations of students reconsider their life choices. The facility's communication system crackled again. Director Kosh Prime, please respond. The humans have taken over the cafeteria and are insisting on cooking for everyone. The Vorthan guards are crying. I repeat, the Vorthan guards are crying. They say it's the first time anyone has ever made them soup when they were sad. Maya patted Kosh Prime's shoulder sympathetically. See, that's the thing about humans. We are really, really good at taking care of each other. Even when we are mad at you, we still don't want you to go hungry. This is impossible, the director whispered. Nah, Jake said, checking his improvised weapon for damage. This is just Tuesday. You should see what happens when we really get organized. Mrs. Patterson consulted a small notebook she had somehow managed to keep throughout her captivity. Speaking of organization, we need to discuss transportation home. I promised Mrs. Henderson I'd water her tomatoes, and she gets very particular about her garden schedule. You want to go home? Vex-Nine asked, surprised. After what we have done to you. Well, yes, dear, we have lives to get back to. Tommy has a chemistry test on Monday. Maya's daughter is expecting her home for dinner tonight, and Jake promised to fix the Hendersons' fence this weekend. But don't you want revenge? Don't you want to make us pay for what we have done? The humans exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that comes from decades of living in the same small town. Honestly? Maya said, we mostly just want you to learn from this. Maybe next time you meet a new species, try asking them what they need instead of trying to figure out how to break them. And maybe, added Sarah, consider that the galaxy might be a lot more interesting if you spent your energy building things up instead of tearing them down. Director Kosh Prime stared at these impossible beings who had turned his entire understanding of power upside down. They had been tortured, isolated, and terrorized. By every law of psychology and physiology he understood, they should be broken, compliant, eager to please their captors. Instead, they were offering life advice and asking for a ride home. We could make you an offer, he said slowly, an idea forming in his ancient mind. Your people could join our empire. We could offer you positions of authority, advanced technology, worlds to govern. That's very kind, Mrs. Patterson said politely, but we like our little town just fine, thank you. Besides, Maya added with a grin that held just a hint of warning, I think you have got enough problems managing the empire you already have. Maybe focus on that before you try to expand. As if summoned by her words, another announcement echoed through the facility. Director, the Zephyrian delegation is requesting immediate release. They say the humans taught them about labor unions, and they want to renegotiate their subjugation contract. Jake chuckled. Tommy's been busy. I just explained about collective bargaining, the teenager said innocently. It's basic civics. Director Kosh Prime felt the foundations of his civilization shifting beneath his feet. If other species learned that resistance was possible, that cooperation was more powerful than coercion, that strength came from unity rather than dominance. What do you want from us? He asked quietly. Maya considered this seriously. A ride home would be nice, and maybe you could try being friends with some of these other species instead of conquerors. See how that works out for you. Friends. Vex-Nine repeated the word like it was a foreign concept, which, for him, it basically was. It's not that complicated, Sarah explained. You find out what makes people happy, you help them achieve it, and they help you with your problems in return. It's like conquest, but with more cookies and less screaming. And if it doesn't work? Maya's expression grew serious. Then you will have learned something valuable about yourselves. But if it does work, she gestured around the laboratory, at the humans who had turned a torture facility into an impromptu community center. Well, imagine what you could accomplish if everyone in your empire actually wanted to help. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibilities that none of the aliens had ever considered. Finally, Director Kosh Prime activated his communicator. All stations, prepare a transport vessel for our guests, and open diplomatic channels with all subjugated worlds. It appears we have some renegotiating to do. As the humans of Millfield prepared to return to their small town and their ordinary lives, they left behind an empire in the early stages of a very extraordinary transformation, because sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't fighting back against oppression, sometimes it's simply refusing to break, and sometimes it's showing your oppressors that there's a better way to live. Maya Reeves made it home in time for dinner, with stories that her daughter would never quite believe, and a quiet satisfaction that somewhere in the galaxy, a civilization was learning that strength didn't come from causing pain, it came from bearing it together and choosing kindness anyway. After all, that's just what humans do. 6 months later, the Galactic Research Council received a data packet that would fundamentally reshape their understanding of interspecies relations. It came from Director Kosh Prime, and it was titled Preliminary Results of the Millfield Protocol. The report was unprecedented. Species after species that had been classified as subjugated were now listed as collaborative partners.
Productivity across the Empire had increased by 400%. Rebellions had dropped to zero. Most shocking of all, voluntary enlistment in the Galactic fleet had reached record highs. Dr. Vex-Nine, now serving as the Empire's first director of interspecies happiness studies, had become something of a celebrity in academic circles. His research papers on cooperative pain management and the therapeutic applications of shared suffering were revolutionizing medical science across 12 star systems. But the real proof of the Millfield Protocol's success came in the form of a small news item buried in the Galactic Broadcasting Network's daily reports. Local Nebraska town receives first ever Galactic Peace Prize for services to interspecies relations. The ceremony was held in Millfield's high school gymnasium because the town hall wasn't big enough to accommodate the diplomatic delegations from 47 different worlds. Maya Reeves, wearing her best church dress and looking slightly overwhelmed, accepted the award on behalf of her neighbors. "We are honored," she said into the microphone that had been hastily set up between the basketball hoops, "but honestly, we just did what anybody would do. We took care of each other, and we tried to help some folks who seemed to have lost their way." In the audience, director Kash Prime wiped away what his species called emotional lubricant, but which looked suspiciously like tears. Beside him, Mrs. Patterson handed him a tissue and a homemade cookie, because even reformed galactic overlords needed comfort food sometimes. The Vorthan delegation, no longer sleepy but wide awake with enthusiasm, had prepared a traditional song of gratitude. The Nexari had brought their children to meet the humans who had taught their parents about the revolutionary concept of asking nicely. Even the Thrakari, despite their natural tendency toward dramatic collapse, had managed to stay conscious for the entire ceremony. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Tommy Chen, now a freshman at the local state university studying what he called applied galactic diplomacy, stood up to address the crowd. "A lot of people ask me what it was like being kidnapped by aliens and tortured for science," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the gymnasium's acoustics. "And the honest answer is, it was terrible. It hurt, and it was scary, and for a while there, I wasn't sure we were going to make it home." The alien delegations shifted uncomfortably in their specially designed chairs. "But the thing is," Tommy continued, "the worst part wasn't the pain. The worst part was seeing how lonely and scared our captors were. Here were these beings who had conquered half the galaxy, and they were so afraid of everyone else that they couldn't imagine any relationship that wasn't based on dominance and submission." He paused, looking around the room at the mixture of humans and aliens, former enemies now sharing popcorn and debating the merits of different basketball strategies. "So yeah, they hurt us, but we hurt for them too. Because nobody should have to live that afraid, that alone, that convinced that the only way to be safe is to make everyone else unsafe." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of several alien species attempting to applaud with appendages that weren't quite designed for the task. The result was a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and what sounded like underwater clapping, but the sentiment was unmistakable. Jake Morrison, now serving as the town's unofficial ambassador to the galactic community, stood up and grinned. "Well, if we are done with the speeches," Mrs. Patterson made her famous apple pie, "and I think our guests deserve to try some real human comfort food." The evening dissolved into the kind of chaotic community gathering that Millfield had perfected over decades of church suppers and town meetings. Alien dignitaries found themselves engaged in heated discussions about the merits of different pie crusts. The Nexari delegation discovered that human children were willing to teach them playground games that involved cooperation rather than conquest. The Vorthan, it turned out, were excellent at organizing potluck dinners once they stopped falling asleep from boredom. As the night wore on, Maya found herself standing outside the gymnasium with Director Kash Prime, both of them watching through the windows as their respective peoples continued to figure out how to be friends. "I still don't understand it completely," Kash Prime admitted, his voice thoughtful. "How did you know that kindness would be more effective than force?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I don't think we did know, not really. It's just, when someone hurts you, you have a choice. You can hurt them back, or you can try to figure out why they are hurting in the first place. And you chose to help us. We chose to help ourselves," Maya corrected gently, "by helping you. See, that's the thing about community. It's not just about taking care of the people you like, it's about taking care of everybody, because everybody's connected." Through the window, they could see Mrs. Patterson demonstrating the proper technique for making coffee to a fascinated group of alien scientists. Nearby, Sarah Mills was explaining basic chemistry to species that had mastered faster-than-light travel but had never considered the therapeutic applications of baking soda volcanoes. "Your species is remarkable," Kash Prime said quietly. Nah, Maya replied with a smile. We are just stubborn, and we are lucky enough to live in a place where being stubborn about taking care of each other is considered a virtue. A year later, the Galactic Research Council published their final report on the Millfield Protocol. The document was over 3,000 pages long and included detailed analyses of cooperation theory, community psychology, and the sociological implications of what they termed weaponized compassion. But buried in the appendices was a single-page addendum that captured the essence of what had happened in that small Nebraska town. Note, upon further reflection, the research team has concluded that humans do not in fact have an unusually high pain tolerance. Rather, they have an unusually high capacity for transforming pain into purpose, isolation into community, and enemies into friends. This appears to be a species-wide adaptation that has allowed them to thrive in environments that would break most other forms of consciousness. Recommendation: do not attempt to study human pain tolerance through torture. Attempt instead to study human joy tolerance through friendship. Initial results suggest this approach may be far more scientifically productive, not to mention significantly more pleasant for all involved. Also, their coffee is excellent. The report was signed by Dr. Vex-Nine, Director of Interspecies Happiness Studies, and co-signed by Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, Consulting Specialist in Community Relations and Baked Goods. In the margins, someone had written in very neat handwriting, "Remember to send thank you notes to the Zephyrian delegation, their casserole was lovely," and in the end, that might have been the most human thing of all. Because even in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, advanced technology and ancient wisdom, the people of Millfield, Nebraska, had managed to accomplish something truly extraordinary. They had taken a civilization built on fear and suffering, and taught it how to say please and thank you. They had shown that the strongest force in the universe wasn't the ability to cause pain, it was the ability to bear it together, transform it into something better, and still have enough kindness left over to share with strangers. After all, that's just what humans do, and sometimes that's exactly what the galaxy needs.